Hi, I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. All right, folks, we are doing a second episode today because something unbelievable just happened in Washington, D.C. Mark Carney and Donald Trump met in the Oval Office. Things were going okay, kind of. Donald Trump was sort of humiliating Mark Carney, like low level, just taking jabs and shots. And then the Q&A happened, and everything unraveled and fell apart, and it was chaos, and it was humiliating for Mark Carney and for Canada. We're going to get to it all, but quickly, if I could just ask you to do me a quick favor, hit the like button. It really helps us with the YouTube algorithm. We want to be discovered by as many Canadians as possible. All right, folks. So Mark Carney was in Washington, D.C. As I said, they did their first official bilateral meeting between the Canadian delegation and the Americans in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump. I think this was a bad idea in the first place. I think that after what happened with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he was just absolutely lambasted in this Oval Office in that exchange that happened where J.D. Vance and Donald Trump just absolutely destroyed him. And it was so devastating for Zelensky and his image and everything he was trying to do. I'm surprised that any world leader would go into this stage again, into the sort of lion's den. And yet here we have Mark Carney, just 1 week and a half after winning the Canadian election, shows up in Washington with his delegation. And let me just add that his delegation is entirely made up of former Trudeau Liberal cabinet ministers. So from the Trump perspective, the same administration that he absolutely loathed, right? Justin Trudeau was out there undermining and trying to embarrass President Trump at every opportunity, always taking jabs at Trump, always sort of trying to pretend that Canadians were somehow better than Americans and taking shots at Trump. Same with Freeland, his former deputy prime minister. You know, the whole idea, the whole reason why Carney was even able to get elected in the first place is in part because he represented change in the minds of some Canadians. It's not really a new administration when you show up with Dominic LeBlanc and Melanie Joly, and I believe that's Bill Blair, the same people that were part of the Trudeau government. But alas, this is what happened, and I want to basically play it to you in its entirety, and I will jump in and make comments where necessary. So here it is, folks. This is the first bilateral agreement, bilateral meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney with us. As you know, just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't take full credit. His party was losing by a lot, and he ended up winning. So I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine. But I want to just congratulate you. That was a great election, actually. We were watching it with interest, and I think Canada chose a very talented person, a very good person. As we spoke before the election quite a few times. And it's an honor.
Okay, we could stop it there for a second, or you could just mute it and we'll keep it playing. So folks at home watching, Trump just spends a minute here just talking about the renovations that they've done to the Oval Office. But you could just see it from the beginning, like Mark Carney is put in an awkward situation, right? Because Trump does what Trump does, right? He says that he himself, like Trump was the greatest thing that's ever happened to Mark Carney, and Mark Carney just has to kind of make a face. Like it's not his turn to talk, and so he can't like talk over Trump and interrupt him. Yeah, you can see from the B-roll here that they're just still talking about the renovation that's gone on in the room around him. Trump loves to sort of facilitate and be the host, but Carney's put in an awkward situation there. He just kind of has to smirk. Trump takes credit basically for what happened to Carney. He says it was the greatest political comeback in history, even more of a political comeback than his own. So what he's really saying is that like the Liberals were completely devastated and down and out. And if it wasn't for him, Carney wouldn't be there, wouldn't be prime minister, which is true. We all know this, right? But the fact that he is at a official bilateral, like state-by-state meeting here, and Trump is saying this, it's just embarrassing for Carney. I'm going to skip ahead here because Trump goes down a tangent. You can see he's zooming in on Marco Rubio because he starts talking about the Houthis and funding wars in the Middle East and beyond. You can see J.D. Vance there as well, the vice president. I'll just skip ahead to here and we can go back to Trump speaking about Canada.
Mark, would you like to say a few words?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'm on the edge of my seat, actually. But thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president, focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker, securing your borders, ending the scourge of fentanyl and other opioids, and securing the world. And I've been elected with my colleagues here, with the help of my colleagues here. I'm going to spread the credit to transform Canada. with a similar focus on the economy, securing our borders, again on fentanyl. Much greater focus on defense and security, securing the Arctic and developing the Arctic. And the history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together. And I look forward to, addressing some of those issues that we have, but also finding those areas of mutual cooperation so we can move forward.
That's great. Very nice. Thank you very much. It's a very nice statement.
Okay, so let me just pause it for a second there. If we can just pause it. So from that in and of itself was actually pretty good, right? Like I wouldn't say that Mark Carney necessarily went in there and kissed the ring, but he was jovial, he was friendly, he was affable. You could tell that they have a better relationship and a better rapport than Trump did with Trudeau. So already they're on to a better start. But despite the quite positive, I would say, back and forth, it was quite short. Again, Trump spent half of the time that he was talking about the room he was in, and then a different war in a different part of the world, and not really much about Canada other than taking credit for our election. And then Mark Carney kind of said what he had to say. He was much more deferential to Trump than he ever would have been in Canada. Now, remember, here at Juno News, we actually reported this. We reported that the head of the Eurasia Group, who employs Mark Carney's wife and employs Mark Carney's advisor, Gerald Butts, this is Ian Bremner, he said that Canada would quietly fold after the election, that Mark Carney would quietly fold. I think that's what we just saw, right? We just saw him say to Trump, you're a transformational president, you've done so much for the worker, we really admire you and we want to build up your relationship, and then hit all the points that Trump wanted: fentanyl, the border, the Arctic, carrying our fair share when it comes to military expenditures, etc. So really different than the Mark Carney on the election campaign, really different than the Mark Carney that spoke to older liberal boomers and convinced basically all NDP voters across the country to go on his side. Quite a different look. If I were one of those liberals, one of those people who was an NDP voter that switched sides and put Mark Carney over the edge, I would look at that and feel a little bit betrayed, feel a little bit like Mark Carney put his elbows down. But that's just the start, right? Then the Q&A happens, and then the media get their chance, and this is where things go really sideways for Mark Carney. Again, I don't really know why he agreed to do this in the first place. If they had just done a quick meeting and, said, here we are, we're doing our meeting, we're going to go negotiate behind closed doors, that would have been better. So journalists ask a question, and again, this is where it just gets really uncomfortable because President Trump resumes his rhetoric, right? The whole 51st state thing didn't go away. Carney pretended that Trump respects Canadian sovereignty during the campaign, but that's not even true. President Trump, you can tell, he continues to think, he truly believes that it would be better if North America were just one giant country. And so he goes on his typical rant, basically, about how the border shouldn't exist, it's artificial. And Mark Carney's just left sitting there, looking sheepish, kind of grinning. What can he really say? He can't really say anything. And President Trump is just walking all over him. It's really, really embarrassing. Okay, let's play this clip.
Mr. President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state. Were you joking?
No. Well, I still believe that, but takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said that's the way it was meant to be. But I do feel it's much better for Canada, but we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership, and I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
And they have, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military participation because Mark knew, they were low, and now they're stepping it up, and that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
So just pure chaos, absolute, utter chaos in the Oval Office. And, Mark Carney's lucky that the camera was zoomed in on Trump when he was talking about the 51st state and the artificial border, because I would have hated to see Mark Carney's face. I'm sure he was just smirking and grimacing like he was when they zoomed out, and he was on camera. But folks, what can he really do, right? He could have jumped in and said, no, Mr. President, that's not going to happen. But it would have been rude. And Mark Carney, you could tell that he's trying to be a gentleman and that he's a polite person. And so that's not really in his temperament. He comes back with a decent line, some properties are just not for sale. And Trump says that's true. But then Trump gets the final line in, never say never, right? And really, again, what can Carney say? He's just setting Trump up. This whole thing was kind of a setup. It was kind of a trap that the Canadians walked right into. Okay, next we have a clip of Donald Trump just basically calling out Chrystia Freeland, talking about Trudeau and how much he despised him, talking about Chrystia Freeland. And this is not good, folks. This is not good. Okay, let's play this clip.
Is the U.S. prepared to walk away from that pact?
For what pact?
USMCA?
No, it's fine. It's there. It's good. We use it for certain things. It's there. We have the USMCA is a good deal for everybody. I won't say this about Mark, but I didn't like his predecessor. I didn't like a person that worked for. She was terrible, actually. She was a terrible person. And she really hurt that deal very badly because she tried to take advantage of the deal and she didn't get away with it. You know what I'm talking about. But we had a bad relationship having to do with the fact that we disagreed with the way they viewed the deal, and we ended it. We ended that relationship pretty much. Trudeau, when I spoke to him, I used to call him Governor Trudeau. I think that probably didn't help his election, but when I spoke to him, I said, "So why are we taking your cars? Why are we taking we want to make them ourselves." I said, and if the price of your cars went up, or if we put a tariff on your cars of 25%, what would that mean to you? He said, that would mean the end of Canada. He actually said that to me. And I said, that's a strange answer, but I understand his answer. But no, it's hard to justify subsidizing Canada to the tune of maybe $200 billion a year. We protect Canada militarily, and we always will. We're going to, that's not a money thing. But we always will. But, it's not fair. But why are we subsidizing Canada $200 billion a year, or whatever the number might be? It's a very substantial number. And it's hard for the American taxpayer to say, gee whiz, we love doing that. Thank you very much. We're going to have a very subsidized. Thank you.
So you could just see Mark Carney so uncomfortable. He's grasping his hands. You remember he was doing that during the debate as well, but you could tell when he's uncomfortable. And how could you not be when President Trump is smashing and slamming your predecessor, naming names of Chrystia Freeland basically, and just saying how terrible she was, and then pivoting on to the auto sector, which is so important to Canada, well, at least Ontario, and so much what Mark Carney has done has been to promote them. And then they just say, that's wrap, cut it off, and time to go. I don't know why Carney would have fallen into this trap. Yes, they were friendly. You can tell that they're actually probably good friends behind the scenes. But I would describe that entire scene as just like a train wreck, a car crash. Not good for Canada. Okay, so after that event ended, Mark Carney left. He went to a nearby building. He was on a rooftop, and he gave an address. And I just want to show the very first question that was asked to him was from a Canadian reporter from the Toronto Star, I believe. And she just says, look, your face during that meeting was a total tell. Tell us what was going through your mind when Donald Trump was talking, and what were you really thinking? Let's play this clip.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. I was watching your face through the meeting in the Oval Office, and I wondered what was going through your mind when the President talked about erasing the artificial border and how he criticized your predecessor and Madam Freeland.
Well, thank you for your question. I'm glad that you couldn't tell what was going through my mind as that was going through. Look, with respect to the first point, the president has made known his wish about that issue for some time. I've been careful always to distinguish between wish and reality. I was clear there in the Oval Office, as I've been clear throughout on behalf of Canadians, that this is never going to happen. Canada is not for sale. It never will be for sale. Some things, as I said in the room, some things are never for sale. And he agreed with that. So I distinguish between the two. And then with respect to the importance of reestablishing a constructive relationship for negotiations of a partnership, of an economic and security partnership, which is what we were here for. I look forward, not back, and I think we established a good basis today.
Okay, so it's kind of amusing that Carney said, well, you're asking that question, so that's good that you couldn't tell what was going through my head. Yeah, we could all tell, buddy. We could all tell that you had made a very big mistake, a bad decision to go to that meeting in the first place, and that you couldn't contain your uncomfortableness and your awkwardness, and basically the fact that President Trump was humiliating you by continuing with this rhetoric, showing that he doesn't respect you as much as you played that he did. I will give him some credit that, yes, the relationship does seem to be better than it was under Trudeau, in part because Donald Trump seems to take great joy and glee from the fact that Mark Carney had this huge political comeback because of Donald Trump. Like, Pierre Poilievre basically lost because Donald Trump inserted himself into our election. I don't think that that's even a stretch to say that Trump is a major reason, if not the biggest reason, why Carney was elected. And therefore, Carney kind of owes Trump, right? Like, Trump believes that he kind of did Carney a favor by helping him stay in power, and therefore there's going to be some kind of a special relationship based on that, which is not good for Canada, not good for the future of our two countries and future trade relationships. Really unbelievable. What a train wreck. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.